Now, it's also a patriarchal tradition, basically, but they have a very deep understanding of the organs, and particularly the reproductive organs, and the role that the reproductive organs play in spiritual development. Now, reproductive organs, we know, are very different between men and women. And so he and I started a conversation about women's spiritual power, how it manifests in the body, how it affects life around us. And so he was another early interviewee. And then I heard of an indigenous Aleut elder, Larry Merkuliev, who has spoken extensively about women's circles and the power that women have in circle to bring their womb to the outside and collectively birth something new for the sake of the community. And here too, I was moved by this remembrance of how women could come together and contribute something spiritually, not to their own evolution, which we've so come to think is the most important thing in this spiritual milieu we're a part of, but how we would naturally just contribute to the evolution of the community. And so that too was very inspiring. And I interviewed him in Anchorage, and he talked quite a bit, so he's in the chapter on creative space and ceremony and women's circles. And I talked to Sabanfu Somé, who knows a great deal about women's spiritual power. She also is an indigenous elder from the Dagara tribe. And she talks about community and women's instinctive power to create community with spiritual realms, and to protect community from negative or harmful influences. And so besides her, I interviewed Pamela Wilson, who is an Advaita Vedanta teacher in Santa Fe. And she talks a lot about beauty, about the power of beauty, about beauty as a divine quality, and how women relate to beauty and express beauty. And I spoke with Elizabeth Frediani, who's a healer in Washington State. And she talked about receiving and the esoteric foundations of women's receiving qualities. A lot about the second chakra and how when we're pregnant, we are merged with another being in our womb, and how we are so attuned through that function to relate to another being and at the same time be one with that being. So we have this attunement to always be taking in information from outside of us. And she talked a lot about protecting that capacity so that we don't just drain our energy, but to work with the power of receiving. I always forget people, but let's see. Maybe that's, Dorothy Atala. I don't know if any of you have read The Conversations with the Goddess, but it's a really wonderful book about, well, Dorothy, right now I think she's about 75 years old. She's from the Midwest, and she started at some point in her life, in her 70s, having visitations from a group of beings called the grandmothers, who represent the divine feminine. And so I'd read that book, and it's really an amazing book about women's power, and I'd inquired with her whether she had any extra material left over from her conversations with these beings that I could use in the book. And she got back to me and said that they'd actually agreed to an interview. So I have, in the chapter on the earth, I have information from the grandmothers about how women's blood is absolutely in sync with the energies of the earth in a unique way. So those are the contributors, and that's the inspiration. And I also, in the book, interviewed a lot of women and collected a lot of dreams and spiritual experiences of women, because I really think that's where our wisdom is coming from. You know, there's a certain amount of information from the seers and the healers and the teachers, but if we pay attention to our dreams and our instincts, I think that's really where where we're going to get guidance. And so there's a big component in the book of women contributing their own very intimate experiences of revelation, basically. So the powers in the book that I described, there are 8 chapters, well, there are 9 chapters, 10 chapters, 9 powers. There's the power to nourish. There's the power of synchronizing with the earth, the power to receive, the power to purify, beauty, longing, the power of community, the power of recognizing life's sacredness, and the power of working with creative space. And so they are not power in the traditional sense of the word, meaning that as you awaken these powers in your own body, in your own sense of self, and as you come to experience them, they are not about accomplishing anything. They're not about achieving any kind of goals. They are about your own sacred nature expanding, basically, and growing in that way that life grows, like in a seed, grows into a tree. It's about becoming conscious of one's own being and then participating in helping that life energy grow. And the greatest way we participate in that process is by consciously knowing it as sacred. And then there's sort of an igniting that happens between your consciousness and this life energy, the sacredness in life. And then that's like light upon light. That's like a dance of consciousness. And then there's just an incredible expansion that comes from that. And so in this expansion, there is incredible peace and joy and such freedom, because there's this final resting in oneself. And with that resting, there's so much power to grow and withstand life and participate in life, to suffer and feel joy, and to not ever separate away from oneself again. And so that's really how women's power works, creating, nourishing, sustaining the sacredness of life. So ultimately, all these powers, there are levels to the powers. So if you take beauty, for example, you can use a quality of beauty to get something, or you can use beauty to express and transform what's real. And as you do that, there's no getting anything, but there's an incredible impact in your own experience and the experience of others. So again, it's a non-traditional sense of power, but the wholeness and the peace and the sense of connectivity and meaning and deep sense of belonging that come is incredibly transformative and impactful on not only your life, but life around you. Ultimately, all the powers work together to help women participate in the way that the divine is revealing itself right now, at this moment in time, collectively in our evolution, through the earth, through life. So the powers are not really about us individually as much as they are, in the book, is a way to help women participate in this divine revelation, this process of revelation. How the divine expresses itself through life. So along those lines, I'll read a dream from a woman who has practiced a lot of Zen. She's from Germany.